Divers of Reddit, what is your most horrifying experience underwater? My first dive ever. My goggles strap snapped off the rental gear and they floated away. I wasn't scared really, but I was 50 feet underwater without vision. I just kept knocking my tank, which makes a specific noise in the water signaling my dive group. Eventually my goggles were handed to me and we carried on our way with the dive. I can see how it would be easy to freak out, but I just trusted my group and my training, and their response time didn't take more than 15 to 20 seconds. Probably my most horrifying experience is seeing firsthand how underqualified and ignorant some divers and even dive professionals are. I'm pretty sure a girl on our PAL Levy board had no idea what deco limits were. She just dove until her air ran out. The rest of us could hear her dive watch beeping like crazy nearly every dive. On another dive off Charleston, the dive instructor had a clearly panicked diver and either didn't notice or didn't care. There was a lot of silt and surge, and the odd angle the wreck was resting on gave you a kind of vertigo. I wasn't in their group, but right at the start of the dive I see a guy absolutely racing for the mooring line, so I ended my dive to ascend with him. When he hugged me on the surface as thanks for hanging with him, I teared up a little and wanted to punch that instructor in the face. Oh, another horrifying experience is seeing diver masters manhandle marine life, even grabbing a porcupine fish to make it puff up. That happened in Nevis. But overall, recreational diving is awesome and very safe when done properly. If anyone reading this thread is thinking about learning, do not let these stories scare you off. The world underwater is incredible. I had to make an emergency ascent from 120 feet while wreck diving off the coast of North Carolina. The longest 2.5 minutes of my life. I was on a wreck dive off Oahu down about 90 feet with an ex-girlfriend and the owner of a local dive shop. The ex and I are experienced divers and we were all just messing around, checking out the wreck and the turtles nearby. There had been a group that was on the wreck, but they had left as we descended, so it was just us three. About halfway into the dive another person shows up, alone. He got the attention of the dive shop owner, and after furious scribbling on slates, the shop owner came over to us and wrote out, "You both stay down and finish your dive. I'm taking him up," and then turned to the other dude and gave the guy his octopus regulator to breathe from. We didn't really know what was going on, so we had a perfectly lovely dive, got some good pictures, and ascended like normal. When we got back on the boat we heard the story. That other guy was from a different boat and had been diving a totally different dive site. He somehow got separated and lost and had somehow drifted about a mile away from where he went in. There was nothing else around in the direction he was going, except Tahiti a few thousand miles away. Worst part is that the other guy's boat didn't even realize he was gone and left without him. If that guy hadn't floated past our wreck, I don't know what would have happened. The current pushes you away from land where we were, and since the boat didn't even know he was lost, he would have been floating out for a long time before someone realized they had a missing diver. A 16-year-old kid at 50 feet, face down, dead. He breathed down his tank looking for his 17-year-old buddy after they got separated. Other kid died too. Bad day on that beach. Coast Guard and a dive boat pulled them both out at in front of about 30 families and kids enjoying the nice weather. Know a guy who was out diving for crayfish, lobster, by the ocean. They hide under the rocks. As he was diving, a tiger shark emerged from a cave and rammed him, broke his arm and ribs. He managed to climb up onto the rocks before it was possible for anything else to happen. He said the shark was just testing him out. Was spearfishing and had a stringer of fish. On one of my dives I felt a hard tug and turned just in time to see a Goliath grouper inhaling my entire stringer, which was tied to my belt. This experience was only made worse by the fact that I was free diving and about 40 feet down. I was in Belize for a multi-day diving trip with a girlfriend. This was her first dive trip after getting open water certified. We dove the Blue Hole and a few other spots, and because of the depth and number of dives we had to do a decompression stop for 5 to 10 minutes or so at the end of this last dive. During that last dive, my girlfriend was struggling with water getting in her mask and started to panic, and we were between 45 to 60 feet down. I could see she was freaking out and pointing to her mask and slowly going toward the surface. I was trying to make signs to her that she had to stay down and to not go to the surface, but it was really hard to communicate that. At around 15 feet I had to physically grab her and start pulling her down. She had a little air in her BCD which wasn't helping. I cleared any air from her BCD and just started pulling her down. It was really so scary. No one wants the bends. When we finally got on the boat she thought I was just mad at her for not swimming with the rest of the group, thinking I didn't understand she was having mask issues and didn't realize what I was trying to tell her. One of my first dives was in shit show conditions. There was a strong current and so much sand/debris everywhere that visibility was at about 12 inches. For some reason the dive master was like, "It'll be fine once we get below 40 feet. We started descending on a guide wire, and after getting to about 55 feet my brother and I, who were dive partners, could not see anyone else in the group. We waited at the bottom of the wire for 10 minutes, and after no one showed up we started to think that the rest of the group would be waiting on the surface. We came up, and one guy from our group was at the buoy looking confused, and the boat was gone. Turns out there were so many problems that the boat driven away so that the waves wouldn't throw it on top of us, but there were such large swells that the boat couldn't relocate us. We floated for about an hour before finally getting the boat's attention and being picked up. By far the worst motion sickness/dehydration I've ever experienced. Coming up from a dive in Indonesia, didn't realize a sea snake was coming up for air at the same time until I surfaced. Everyone on the boat just started yelling snake. I kept my distance and it went back down, but it freaked me out how close it was. If they hadn't have warned me, I might have run into it. Did a second dive and saw the bugger again. He kept following me for a bit and that freaked me out. I was 30 meters below the surface in a small shipwreck. At one point my tank softly hits the ceiling and my jacket kept inflating, which means I was quickly going back up to the surface, which is really dangerous. I noticed something was wrong when I couldn't deflate the jacket. I had to quickly swim down with all my might to reach fellow divers, but it was really difficult. Of course this results in consuming more oxygen. I had to stop the airflow from the tank to my jacket, and then I was able to delve at it. I had to inflate it manually for the rest of the dive. I was also diving with a group of beginners once and there was a lot of underwater current at one point. Eventually someone got sick and was going to throw up. He was about to remove his mask to puke, but the instructor quickly swam towards him and stuck her hand on his mask. The guy had to puke in his regulator. Oh, and some other guy found a moray eel and pointed at it. He got bit. Was drift diving about 110 feet down off the shelf in Cozumel. Partner and I didn't realize the depth. Stupid mistake, I know. Had to take 2 safety stops with only 300 C remaining in the tank. We had a can of spare air, good for about 45 breaths. 2 safety stops, and I feel the air in my tank getting easier and easier to pull. Not good. Made it to the surface with less than 100 C. Didn't get nitrogen sickness. Woo. Was intense. I was diving off the coast of California near a kelp bed in this beautiful marine preserve. The scenery down there is amazing. I came across this area that was destroyed. All the sand and plants were trodden. There was a dive club that carved a path of destruction down there. They pulled up a balloon and sand dollars for souvenirs and left the bottom looking like shit. I don't usually care about that stuff, but the area is a marine preserve meant for diving, and you guys left it way worse than you found it. I had a dive buddy go away, out of air, on me on a wreck in the street. Lawrence. Thankfully this was an ODCO dive in 100 foot of water and we weren't actually inside the wreck, but the part that made it particularly challenging was that the wreck was right in the middle of the shipping lane, where really large freighters travel, with really high current, so we couldn't just make an easy ascent to the surface. We had to navigate along a series of lines, pretty thick rope tied off on some good anchor points that had been laid out to give divers something to hang on to so they could pull themselves against the current on the path to the wreck and stabilize themselves during the swim back to the anchor line. We were making our exit and everything was going fine. He was on my long 7-foot hose out in front and I had a hand on his knee, so we were keeping in good contact. Then for one moment I let go of his knee to deal with some gear, and in that split second he came off the line and got caught in the current, ripping my regulator out of his mouth in the process. I saw him manage to grab hold of another of the lines downstream, and he was hanging on for dear life, completely inverted, in a shipping lane, with no regulator in his mouth, and no gas in his tank, flapping in the current like a flag in the wind. I bolted towards him as quickly as I could, while still maintaining my own safety, and gathered up the 7 feet of abandoned hose and regulator along the way. I caught up to him, and managed to get the regulator back into his mouth, but since he was inverted, it went in upside down, and as a result didn't breathe like it should. He fixed that himself, but slipped off the line he was holding onto in the process. I managed to get a hold of him, but not without having to let go of the line myself, so I ended up hooking both of my feet around the line to keep us both in place. Somehow I managed to pull us both back down to where we could grab hold of the line. It was at this point that another diver in our group saw what was going on and assisted, and from there we were able to get back to the boat without any further incident. Doing my PADI open water in Australia about 10 to 15 years ago, and aside from all the hilarious brushes with jellyfish and Aussies, and even worse, other Brits, I had a good dive that was just beautiful, warm, clear water, good dive buddies, calm seas, loads of fish, just what you hope for, except that I'm having trouble equalizing. It's not awful, just a bit distracting, so I carry on. Eventually, we head back up, and the pain starts to increase, still not debilitating or anything, just that I'm becoming more aware of it. Back on the boat, and it's still there, so I talk to the dive master and he just waves it off. I stick my finger in my ear, and can almost feel something in there. He says it's a bubble of water, and not to worry. Okay, grand. Except it doesn't feel liquidy. It feels solidy, and it hurts. A lot. Now, I keep trying and failing to not stick my fingers in there, but each failure still yields no results until suddenly I feel a scraping as I withdraw my pinky. There, sat on my finger as happy as a clam, is a tiny bastard crab. I look at him, he looks at me. I look at the other divers, they look sick. I look at the crab, and I swear to God he gave me a cheerio type wave and just scuttled off my finger and onto the deck before disappearing behind some kit. I spent the next little forever convincing myself it didn't lay eggs or leave a few mates behind. He didn't, by the way. And generally wondering why we have stupid crab holes built into our stupid heads. Thanks for watching, and share your stories. Don't forget to consider the idea to maybe think about potentially subscribing. Peace.